And like many of you here today, our first guest this afternoon knows what it means to operate a business. And in his case, it came after being laid off as a geologist after the oil collapse of the late 1980s. After interviewing with more than 20 banks, he secured funding for what was then a new idea, a brewery and a pub to be located in what was then a rundown warehouse district in lower downtown Denver. Many thought he was crazy, and he was crazy, but crazy like a fox. Today, Denver's first brew pub, the Hickenlooper Brewery, is the beating heart of the very lively Lodo Entertainment District. After serving the Denver community in many capacities, he ran for mayor in 2003 without ever having run for public office before. Despite strong opposition, he captured the attention of voters with his outsider's perspective and his business capabilities. He won in a landslide by 2-1. He pushed aside partisanship and reached out to Denver's suburban leaders and Colorado's Republican governor to create new partnerships. As mayor, he overhauled the city's financial system, created the city's first chief financial officer position, and streamlined many city services. His efforts in recycling, water conservation, and other green initiatives have saved Denver millions of dollars. And his Road Home program to tackle the homeless problem in Denver has become a model for other cities. After serving only 2 years as mayor, Time magazine placed him among the top 5 big city mayors. Last November, he ran for governor of Colorado and was elected with a platform focused on creation of jobs and economic development. In using his experiences as a jobs creator and consensus builder in government, he wants to increase opportunities for the people of this state. He has a track record of bringing people together to solve problems, and he intends to do for all the citizens of Colorado what he has done for those in Denver. And now I would ask you to join with me in giving a warm cattleman's welcome to the Governor of Colorado, John Hickenlooper.
You know, that's the first time I've been introduced as a governor since the election, and it's the longest darn introduction I've ever heard. I'll fix that. So I apologize to Steve and Dan, but appreciate the opportunity to talk to you for just a couple minutes before you really get into gear. You know, I grew up in a suburb of Philadelphia. I came out to Colorado as a geologist in the beginning, back in first time in the middle 70s, and I moved out here full time in 1980. And you know, I had 5 great years in the oil and gas business, then ended up getting into this brew pub thing. You know, it took me 2 full years to raise the money to open the first brew pub, you know, restaurant that brews its own beer in the Rocky Mountains. I couldn't get my own mother to invest. She kept saying, "Who wants to eat dinner in a brewery?" I said, "No, Mom, it's like a bakery. It's fresh." And then I kind of got, you know, we got that going and did pretty well. And we opened up brew pubs in Fort Collins, Colorado, and Colorado Springs, Colorado, and in Omaha. We opened a bunch of them around the country, and they did pretty well. And then I kind of got goaded into running for mayor back in 2002, just because all my customers, and we all were pretty cynical, we hated every elected official we saw, right? It seemed like it was just making red tape, or it was headaches for us, whether it's the restaurant business or one of their businesses. And at a certain point, I remember it vividly, several had said, you know, the present mayor is term limited out. It's going to be a chance for someone like you to do this. And my first question was, why would anybody in their right mind do something like this? But as we started talking about it over the course of weeks and months, and I went around this country and met a couple mayors, this is the only country in the world where we do control our government. We don't always think that, doesn't always seem like it, but we are the experiment in democracy. That you see what's going on in Egypt right now and many of the Arab countries. They're dealing with what the growing pains and the challenges that real freedom creates. And I ran for mayor 8 years ago, and I never ran for student council or class president. I never thought I'd be doing something so silly. And I did it, and we had a bunch of restaurants. In 2002, I took 12 weeks of vacation. I had a pretty good life. And let me tell you, as a mayor, I'd be lucky to get 1 or 2 weeks. We are at a point where the world is changing. And I think as Americans, we do have to reinvent ourselves, reinvent our government and our relationship to government. And we can't just be critical about it all the time. We have to, where it's appropriate, get involved in it. And again, not try and disrupt it or overthrow it, but bring it back to some of those core values. And the thing I bragged about when I was running for governor out in the rural parts of Colorado is that we had made Denver city government 7% smaller, 7% fewer employees. And we recognize that people expect more efficiency, more effectiveness. I mean, this is the 21st century, and we maybe don't need so many people delivering those collaborative services like education and transportation, highways, that we can do it with less resources than we did. Now, I realize you guys are all in the cattle business, but I say it to you in that sense that this is a national issue, and it's not just a Colorado issue. And I look at one of the great joys of running for Colorado, for governor of Colorado, was I got to go all over the state. I was in most of the counties 3 or 4 times. I was in every county, all 64 counties at least once, almost every county twice. And I got to sit at the kitchen tables of people's farms and ranches all over this state and hear their real challenges and what they were going through and how they looked at their decisions. And, it reminded me a lot. My mother grew up in the Depression. Her father lost everything he owned in the Great Depression. And, I grew up, my mom would wash tin foil and saran wrap and tape it to the refrigerator door, and we'd reuse it. I didn't get a new pair of blue jeans until I was 11. I finally got taller than my older brother. But that sense of frugality, somehow we kind of lost it. And to a certain extent, there's a lot we lost in that sense of, my mother's generation was connected, even though she grew up on a small farm on the edge of what was becoming suburbs. Everybody there, everybody in the suburbs, everybody in the city had some connection to where their food came from. And we've lost that. And I spent a lot of time in the last 12 months during the campaign of trying to figure out how do we get people in these large cities, in these urban areas, to recognize how important it is that we have a safe, secure source of food, right? And that is every bit as big a part of our national security as having a Department of Defense or trying to figure out how we import less oil. I think that notion that we have a common self-interest, that we have a necessity to connect the people in the suburbs, people in the urban areas, let's call them metropolitan areas, and help them recognize what a critical part this is. And the Governor Tom Vilsack, who's now the Secretary of Agriculture, he didn't start, but he helped grow something in Iowa called RAGBRAI, where they have to ride across Iowa, where they get people from the suburbs to bike ride for a week all across Iowa. Then, I think last year they told me they had 11,000 people do this. And it puts a bunch of money into the local economy, provides a little incremental income for people, but it also connects people from a kind of an urban way of life and lets them see where their food comes from and recognize that this is, in many ways, kind of the heart and soul where this country came from. So we're going to try and do that in Colorado, and I think we're going to try and promote it. I think a lot of states should look at what are those, whether it's on a bicycle or whatever way you can find, and let people recognize the importance of that relationship so that decisions don't get made in Washington that are at your detriment, that come at your expense. They gave me remarks to speak, and it's all pretty much about how great Colorado is, and you guys all have ranches in Colorado. I'm going to spare you that. You all know how great Colorado is already. But I do think the notion of reinventing government and taking pride in our government, right? That's not Republican or Democrat. That's something that, as we look at China and India and the way the world's changing, we all have to do that. And I think the notion of connecting and making sure that people recognize the connection between where our food comes from and our modern life is every bit as important. So I'm here to kind of deputize you. Now, some people are going to say that's impossible. You know, the government's too far out of control. We don't want to, we don't want to get so dirty to get our hands anywhere near it. Well, when I first ran for mayor, and everybody in this area said, he's a nice guy. You know, he built a great business. He works hard, but he doesn't know anything about politics. It's impossible. And I used to carry around this clipping from the Denver Post. It was about 3.5 inches long, one column. It was talking about a professor of public speaking up at the University of Wyoming, up in Laramie. And she was telling her class about the importance of using opposites when you speak publicly. So if you talk about the worst of times, you talk about the best of times. If you talk about the agony, you talk about the ecstasy in the same sentence. The words gain power by being together. And she asked her class, she says, what's the opposite of despair? Kid says, joy. She goes, exactly. If you want people to feel despair, use the word joy in the same sentence. Both words gain power by being together. Then she said, what's the opposite of woe? What's the opposite of woe? And a kid way in the back goes, giddy up. And I like that joke because it is the opposite of woe is to giddy up, right? If you don't have enough business or you've got some hard times you're working your way through, like a lot of people in this country, the opposite of woe is to giddy up. And if you think things are impossible, that we can't reclaim our government and take ownership and bring common sense back to it, the opposite of woe is to giddy up. So you're all deputized. I'm going to expect you to get back out when you go home to do a lot of, well, first thing while you're here, spend a lot of money because we need the sales tax revenue. But when you get home, invest yourselves. I'm sure you all do to a certain extent. Do it a little more. Let's take back our government to the people. Again, it's not about Republican, Democrat. It's about bringing common sense and responsibility and having a sense of ownership in all of our government. Thank you all very much. Have a great conference.